Hello, welcome to the channel. I am your host, Magic Jellybean, and this is Robocraft. To keep it short and sweet, I'm going over 5 things I like and 5 things I don't like exactly concerning the new Season 2 update in Robocraft, as well as my personal opinion on some of the balancing changes. Keep in mind, this is an opinion-based list, so these 5 things may not match up with what you like, but that's okay. Make sure you like, subscribe, because it makes my channel look better, and you'll feel better as a result. It's a win-win. Before we begin, of course, let's quickly preface here as to what the balancing changes are before I dive into my completely unbiased list. You might say to yourself, Jelly, what is the Season 2 update balance change? That's a good question, my little jelly hopper, and according to the Steam page for Robocraft,
most of the changes have been done to weapon and movement parts based upon the community feedback polls we've been running. Other changes have been made to make it easier to experiment with F=ma using light and heavy cubes by bringing their tier down to match that of medium cubes. This means your light robot won't be forced into higher tiers anymore. As well as all of this, we've made changes to increase the time to kill, which has addressed 2 requests from the community provided to us in the additional feedback section. Increase time to kill and give cubes more health.
that was a lot, but if you can believe it, I did that all under one breath. Anyways, that should generally help you understand what you're getting into concerning this video. If you want to know about the update, please visit the Steam page or pause the video as I quickly scroll through the balancing changes so that you have a chance to review it before continuing forward. And if you simply don't care and just want to watch a list video to indulge in your hunger for listed content, which I certainly will not make a habit of providing, then you have probably set this video already to 1 1/4 speed, or 1 1/2 if you're in a rush. I know I'm not the only one that does that, come on now. Starting with things I don't like. At number 5, we have CPU restriction, mainly concerning weapons. This one is at number 5 because it doesn't really impact me too much, but it is slightly inconvenient, so it makes a spot on my list. Before this update, I had a trick up my sleeve. No one knows this due to the fact that I did not record Robocraft for a third-party audience such as YouTube before this update, but my 2 favorite guns were, and I guess they still are, railguns and nanos. Why? Because if you use a limited number of railguns or nanos, say you throw 3 T4 rails on a set of splinter legs with some rotors and clap on a few nanos or under-tiered submachine guns, depending on how much ranking you have to work with, you could actually build a T3 robot that had T4 rails on it, and possibly T4 nanos, all the while still being in the T3 class. My favorite 2 builds, which seem to get on everyone's nerves judging by the fact that I'd always get double or triple teamed at the end of matches, was a T3 bot with T4 rails, had another bot, T2 mech and rotors with T3 rails, and T2 nanos. The CPU was light due to ranking restrictions, but these rails basically hit like a truck, and I didn't even have them leveled very far. Here's an example. My T5 rails before this update did 148,000 damage. My T5 rails did 148k, my T4 did 142k damage, and my T3 did a whopping 130k. So basically, with the 3 T4 rails on my T3 bot, I essentially had the firepower of a T5 rail. This could be done with other weapons as well if your CPU ranking wasn't too high, or if you didn't already have, some kind of overleveled weapon on there, such as lasers. You could also do lasers at a limited capacity too. Lasers, in my opinion, were overpowered, so I never played with them, even though I could have. In my opinion, rails could have been left alone. Why? Because in a 1v1 fight, when you have a T4 rail bot with less than 1100 CPU, which was basically everything in my garage, going up against a shield and block spam drones or mech legs, it actually takes a decent amount of skill to win that fight in a 1v1. Having 3 rails is not even maximum firing speed either, so I'm already at a disadvantage. But before I go too in depth on this topic, you now have some insight as to why I don't like this change. Rails still hit hard in my opinion, especially on all my builds, but these type of builds are now at a disadvantage in the normal tiers because the best way to play rails is to use rail spam, which involves 5 to 6 railguns, which isn't a fun when everyone is doing it. But I digress. Moo. Number 4 is the rod nerfs, and rods gain double the weight. This one I find the community is much more upset about. If you don't know or don't use them that much, rods are the equivalent of a line of cube blocks, except they only connect at the end of the said piece. Having a 3 cube long rod, for example, although using slightly more CPU, is an extreme weight savings over 3 cubes. Rods are also able to poke outside of smaller gaps that cubes normally wouldn't be able to. They're also good for making the frame of a robot so that you can pack a layer of cubes around it without having too many connection points to the said frame, so it's better building overall. This makes rods perfect for using weapons. Rods are also benefit an already dying breed of planes and chopper users or rotor users as well. With this nerf, my beloved T4 and T3 rails that I discussed in the previous point are much less agile while in the air. Although rods still have less weight than a respective set of cubes, dodging and weaving from left to right in the air, for example, is much more cumbersome maneuver. Planes were already an underdog before this update, but now this is just burying them in the ground. Overall, I find that there's no reason to nerf rods, as it already took skill to use them in a strategy called rod forcing. Moving on. Number 3 is the rotor agility nerf. This one also ties into number 4. As previously stated, rotors are already at a disadvantage when in the air, especially considering they are now less agile. As you saw in my previous video, rotors now have to resort to either more rotor spam or more block/shield spam to protect their flying capability. This reduces the fun and skill in making lighter robots builds such as mine, or people that don't want a big heavy CPU bot. Not everybody wants to build a 2000 CPU bot. In the same vein, this also nerfs drones, which I am happy and sad about. Although annoying by nature, rotor drones actually still require a lot of skill due to lesser health pool and in comparison to other robots, less weapons. I can care less about hover drones though, those things can burn to the ground. Number 2, we have the egg mortar. Say what you will, but I'm actually not looking forward to the egg mortar specifically. Not because I don't think it's a cool looking gun, but because the T5 mortar is already an annoying weapon. The egg mortar will now remind people that, hey, the mortar still exists, guys, and due to its already childlike nature when being detonated, will cause more players to want to use the mortar. More mortars on the battlefield means more mortar spam, and no one likes mortar spam. If you think this isn't true, look at what happened to Battlefield 3 and 4 and Battlefield 1 when mortars were implemented. Nobody likes mortars. The simple fact that this cosmetic addition will mean we'll start to see more mortars come out will make being killed by one of these eggs even more displeasurable. Number 1, time to kill increased. This comes with a mixed bag of feelings, but although I don't hate this change, I certainly don't take pleasure in it either. I could go all day on this topic, but increasing time to kill only makes games more played out and boring. Although I do like some changes made to time to kill, such as heavy cubes having more health and being lower in tiers and rods getting more health, I generally speaking just don't enjoy larger time to kill rates. If you can remember a time about a year or so ago, it took ages, and I mean ages, to destroy robots, especially those annoying hover drones. Mech legs were super bulky. The only larger time to kill window I enjoyed was when I was fighting megabots. More time to kill means matches take longer, which means less robots I'm making per hour, which means less fun. Although I certainly don't like being 1 or 2 shot by a mega plasma sneaking up on me, the fact that I got surprised just means that I could become a better gamer and I could have had better situational awareness. Slower time to kill also means gun spam and block spam will only become an even better strategy. One thing I despise in this game, again just as an opinion, is shield, block, and gun spam. Now that blocks are bulkier in all weight classes and weapons have more health, this completely destroys smaller CPU builds that were actually well thought of when built, such as my mechcopters. What I loved most about Robocraft, although not perfect, was the irregularities and the inconsistency in what type of builds you saw people running. Drones were viable, block spam was viable to a certain degree, all ranges of CPU builds were viable. I wish I had footage of this, but I played a match where everybody on my team were using mech legs and our builds all looked like dinosaurs. Few of us bothered to even use shields. One guy was a commercial airplane hover, looked like a Boeing 737. We were fighting shield spam enemies and we actually won because of teamwork. It, historically speaking, is one of my most memorable matches. This match occurred about 3 weeks ago, before the time of this video, which, with the new restrictions, builds like these are going to be seen less because it encourages more spam-orientated builds to a certain degree. And, moving on, now that we've got our confessions out the way, here's what I actually enjoyed about the new Robocraft changes. Number 5. Modules re-tiered to T3. One thing I never liked about modules was the fact that I had to play in T5 to use them. This might just be me, but I actually don't play in T5 too often, even though I have the capability, because T5 is where all the squads play at. Also, people tend to all flock to the same type of builds from the factory, and you see the same tryhard builds over and over again. I can certainly respect people who play to win, and I have no bias against them, but for that reason alone, that is exactly why I don't play in T5. I enjoy making fun builds, and these fun builds are sometimes limited in how I can effectively build them to be tanky or be agile, so I tend to make these builds for T3 or T4 if I have to. T3 is perfect because sometimes in a T4 robot I'll still encounter these T5 squads. So one thing I always wished was that I could use these modules, and now I actually get to experience the Danny Phantom module without having to play in an unwanted tier. People in T5 can still use their modules and go beast mode in their squad play, and I can go 88 miles per hour and teleport with the blink module. Number 4. Rod health improved. Although I was just bashing on the rods for adding weight, at number 4 on our list on the dislikes, I'm actually certainly glad the health has been improved. Although more weight hurts lighter builds, we can now use light blocks to lessen some of that load while still having now a decent health pool. Rod forcing will now be much more effective for tankier builds, and I can appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that they're adding a smaller third rod to the game. Kudos to them. There's a 3D rod out there if you haven't seen it. They're making a smaller version now, kind of like the 3-length and 2-length rods. Number 3, we have the T3 Seeker nerf. Let me say up front, I don't actually have a problem with T4 and T5 Seekers. The lock-on time is a decent trade-off for the firepower. The T3 Seeker, however, I believe was a little too strong since the lock-on was basically non-existent, especially when you encounter drone builds like this and this. Effectively, one T3 had the near fire rate of one Seeker, so it was very good on its own. But now, you will need to have 2 to be effective, which I actually appreciate. T3 Seekers were just too good for what you got out of one, and I can respect the nerf. The range nerf also means those pesky little catch me if you can tiny drones will now have to close the gap more, meaning they will be easier to hit. Number 2, the rail nerf. Oh, wait, wrong list. At number 2, things we want to see buffed in Robocraft is rails. Wait, no, still wrong list. Excuse me for a second. At number 2, we have the wheel buff. Wheels now have less CPU and more agility and top speed. Wheels is one of my favorite platforms in the game. Let me say it again, in the game. Although it certainly isn't the most viable in terms of in-game top-tier players, Wheels, especially when combined with propellers and giant boosters, are one of the fastest, if not the fastest forms of transportation, which perfectly suits my favorite playstyle of using nanos with rails to help teammates from the backlines. Seeing Wheels have less CPU and more speed with more health is always a win in my book. Although you are still easy picking for any plasma user, especially plasma planes. If you really hate plasma, just use hovers. And at number 1, we have the ski buff. I'm just kidding. This is an honorable mention. Ski buff, they decrease the mass per CPU by 0.1. Heck yeah. Increase the top speed by 5%. Yeah, boy. Honestly, who uses skis? Anyone who does, kudos to them. I always appreciate a buff to the best Robocraft meme of all time. So at number 1, which should come to no surprise, as I've been talking about it the entire video, is the nano buff. Less energy per shot, more heal per shot. This is probably a little biased, and I certainly wish nanos were buffed under different circumstances, but this is definitely my favorite buff of all time concerning this update. In my opinion, every build needs to have at least 2 nanos on it just as a backup. For a while in my garage, every robot, not including my Megabot of course, had at least 2 or 3 nanos on the back to heal fallen teammates. In this game, although it is always better to shoot an enemy instead of trying to resurrect a near-dead teammate because they'll lose CPU faster than you can heal, it certainly helps to have to spend less energy to heal more teammates. Although anyone with 3 or more nanos will still drain energy, this definitely makes nanos users more relevant now. More range would be nice, but I can certainly appreciate any and all nano buffs as it's my favorite weapon in the game. To be honest, with the increase in bot health and CPU, this won't make nanos really heal any faster from a realistic point of view, but objectively speaking, if nanos got buffed and they didn't buff any health, such as rods or cube health, then this would make the nanos heal even faster, therefore making them even better. And that's my top 10, or I guess my top 5. I might make more of these list-style videos if received well, but I certainly won't promise you the viewer that, as this is certainly an oversaturated market. If you don't believe me, just run a top 10 Marvel search on YouTube and see what you find. Anyways, thanks for stopping by. If you feel you have more relevant top 5 or find that you want to voice a different opinion, please keep it clean, write it in the comments below. As always, I am your host, Magic Jellybean, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.